Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you're all well, and look who's back. We escaped. We escaped Florida. A lot of people thought that was Florida in the US. Trust me, that was not Florida in the US. And that is what happens when you allow a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old to pick your holiday destination. Blind! They're not blind, we were blind. And that's where we ended up. We ended up coming home 2 days early. But look, weren't all their fault the weather. There was a few things that kind of straight into the meat and potatoes, shall we? We'll put that behind us. Pretend it never happened. So look, Idaho 4... I can't even speak properly. Idaho 4 case. A lot of people have been coming to me and they've been saying, look, there's a lot of similarities between the Idaho 4 case and the Kiely Rodni case. And it got me to thinking. Because, mate, you know, we try and be fair. We try and talk about everything. This isn't about jumping on the Brian Kohberger bandwagon. It's not about jumping on that at all. People seem to think that we want him to be innocent, and it's not about that. We just want the right person to be convicted, and for there to be a conviction, and for things not to go tits up. And what we saw in the Kiely Rodni case is a pure example of when something happened to someone and everybody just pretended they never saw anything. They fabricated a party with 400 guests, but we never saw a picture. We saw kids who was supposedly at that party. So in the event that someone lose their life, you would think that in normal situations they would be kind of considered suspects in a potential crime. But no, they were actually running the show to some degree. They were getting involved in the searches and liaising with people and making sure that anyone who witnessed anything came and spoke to them, like some fucking bizarre Children of the Corn setup. And what we've seen in the Idaho 4 case is something very similar. We've seen a situation where 4 students have lost their life, and a delay in speaking to law enforcement about it has become something almost taboo to talk about. You can't mention it, you know, and every excuse under the sun has been made to make out that that is okay, and it's not. But it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder whether the issue isn't so much whether there's some kind of conspiracy here in terms of did these kids do something to these. It's what are the youths of today growing up like? Because it seems to me that they just simply have no fucking empathy for one another. They don't care what happens to one another. It is all about saving your own skin. Now, we heard that both Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk were given or sought and obtained legal counsel pretty much early on. So I can imagine that potentially law enforcement had considered them sketchy as fuck, like some of us already do. And perhaps that was the route that they took in order to protect themselves. They're seemingly not talking to any of their friends anymore. And some people are saying, well, maybe they've been told not to while this trial is going on. And I'm calling that bollocks straight away. In what world would law enforcement in this situation say, look, you cannot talk to your friends until this trial is over? This trial could go on for 2-3 years. What, they're not supposed to talk to anybody they know for 2 years until this is done? Pull the other one, mate. But yeah, these two cases are very, very similar. We've got someone who has lost their life in the Kiely Rodni case, and I believe that was potentially either a drug-induced situation or an alcohol-induced situation that resulted in Kiely perhaps getting into difficulty because they were pissing about, but they knew she'd gone into the water and left her there, and then tried to subsequently cover up what had happened and thought they'd get away with it, fabricating different stories, fabricating potentially Kiely Rodni being played by someone else and saying that she was venturing off, and this Nick the tow truck driver situation, which was either Nick talking shit or someone playing the role of Kiely Rodni. Do you know what I mean? And nothing happened. It just, everybody stopped. And I think that's what's going to happen in this Idaho 4 situation. You've got 2 survivors who broke the law They broke the law. They failed to notify in due time that there had been a death. And that is a criminal offence. Multiple people came to that house under the instruction of people, persons, someone, anyone who had obtained information from, obviously, someone in that house. They didn't pick up the phone and call 911. They picked up a phone or got on text, whatever, and messaged someone beforehand. But we are not allowed to question why. We're not allowed to consider that that could potentially have nefarious connections to it. And again, with the Kiely Rodni case, we speak about, well, what happened? Who was in the car with Kiely? Did anyone say? You can't question it, because these people have been through enough. And I asked this the other day, and I'll ask you again. When it comes to these cases, how much are you willing to turn a blind eye and just accept as normality, not something that's worth knowing about? Why did the 4 kids die? And I call them kids because at the end of the day, they're kids compared to me. And they are kids that lost their lives because of some reason. And on the peripheral of what happened, there are people who seemingly have nefarious connections in their lives. And they were on the peripheral of this group of people. We are hearing multiple things come out. And who knows, maybe it's all shite. And I'm guessing that anyone who's got Brian Koberger pegged as the person who did this all on his own, just done it, like I've said multiple times, just came headed over for no real apparent reason, just thought he'd throw all of his education away, everything, and just done this crime. What is it? How are youths being raised today? Is it simply that something did happen and they just want to distance themselves from it? They don't want anything to do with it, wash their hands of it, and hopefully it'll all disappear, go away. And I just think it's a sad, sorry state of affairs when you think that, you know, what would I want to do? If this was when I was younger and this had happened to one of my friends, what would I be like now? What would I be doing? What would I be reaching out and trying to get done? You know, we've heard how Bethany Funk didn't want to come forward and testify. She didn't want to come and speak at this hearing, and all of a sudden we've got this grand jury that means she doesn't have to. I would, if I had some form of information that could help the situation, I would be leaping forward. I'd be front of the queue. Sign me up. Where do I write? Where do I sign? This is what I saw. There's just so many things in this case that just don't make sense. So many things that don't make sense. And like I say, the Kiely Rodni case, it was exactly the same. We've come away from that knowing nothing, absolutely nothing, apart from what we're supposed to believe is that this girl, who was completely familiar with this area, just got in a car after being compass mentis enough to speak to her mum, message her mum, and tell her mum that she would be home at a specific time. So she knew what time it was. She knew what time she was supposed to be home. Had even been compass mentis enough to jig around the time she was going to be home, so she wasn't that paralytic that she lost track of time, but she was paralytic enough to drive her car into a fucking reservoir, and nobody saw a thing of the 400 people in a party that we never saw anything, never saw any proof of it, and no one ever come forward, nothing, nada. And that's what we're going to see here. Another Greek wall of silence, controlled by people who have money. They have connections to colleges, they have connections to law enforcement, and they can pull strings and make puppets of us all. I'll catch you all in the next one.